welcome everyone to our first virtual Women in Salesforce meetup of 2021. For those of you that might be new to our events, Women in Tech is a Third Republic effort that challenges the gender imbalance that exists among software engineers as well as other technical roles. Our mission is to connect, inspire, and develop the careers of women working in the ecosystem in order to make technology more diverse and inclusive of a working environment, with a vision to empower our community members to be change agents in the world of tech. This evening, we are joined by Krissy Jones and Renee Gregor, both incredibly experienced and successful tech professionals.
We see some familiar faces. Krissy and I have been in the ecosystem and have worked with a couple of folks on the call. I'll do a brief introduction, hand it over to Krissy, and then we'll just kind of get started. And for those on the phone that do know us, these stories will be familiar to you, as we've probably gathered from our experience working in the trenches with most of you to have this frank and really honest discussion today. I'm Renee Gregor. I've been in the ecosystem probably about 15 plus years, holding different roles in sales and go-to-market and delivery. I have the unique opportunity to have had experience with my co-presenter today, Krissy Jones, and respect her immensely as she has gone to market in some global delivery roles. So I'll hand it over to you, Krissy, to kind of make your introduction.
All right, thanks, Renee. Hello, everyone. Again, I know we've got some familiar faces here. So hello to all of our women that we have worked with in technology. Hi, friends. As Renee mentioned, Krissy Jones, I have been working in technology for most of my career. I've been very fortunate out of college. I had a love for computers and technology and the web when it first came out, and it has never stopped. So I've been working in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 18 years, I should say. Not 8 years, I'm trying to take time off the clock there. The age clock. But again, it's been in a global capacity. So everywhere from I lived in Australia to over in France and London. So it's been quite a ride, and I call myself a Salesforce student because the beauty of Salesforce is you never stop learning. They continue to innovate and to grow this platform and its solution in the cloud community. So, as a student, you never stop learning. So very excited to be here with you and discuss our experiences from the delivery side.
So when Krissy and I were kind of getting together and sharing notes, first and foremost, we felt like this was a vulnerable space and we could be a little bit more honest maybe than we normally would. And I told her, I said, somebody that ran restaurants told me, never trust a chef that doesn't have any scars. If he comes out and he looks too clean, it's probably because he's not been cooking for long, and don't trust his food. And Krissy and I kind of got to thinking about that, and I was like, it's so true. To support delivery teams, it's sometimes necessary to kind of show your scars. It's how we learn. It's how we become vulnerable with each other to say, here's where we may have fallen, but here's how we can help someone else, overcome maybe what they are coming up on. And so that's what we hope today is about. Virtual world has turned everything upside down. And especially as delivery leaders, it's really hard for us to connect with our delivery teams, much less our clients. And so what Krissy and I hope to kind of go through with you today is those maybe we'll call out three areas that we feel like you can really zoom in on and support delivery teams. Before we kind of jump to that, the other thing that makes this conversation so unique is that we are talking about Salesforce as a delivery platform, and the platform itself is so customizable. I really lean on Krissy here to speak to some of this, but in my opinion, it can be so customizable to meet these business needs that we sometimes can lose track of that. And our clients are not as educated sometimes in that Salesforce is an umbrella term, meaning that, how many clouds do we have now, Krissy? Can we count them?
Oh my gosh, I think we've lost appendages to count them on. But Renee, you're right. It's the beauty of the Salesforce platform is because our clients are able to either use it out of the box and keep it very simple, or again, customize it to their business and their needs and their organization's needs. And, again, you can customize it to the point where you over customize. But again, usually the best practice and recommendation is to keep things simple, right? If you start to customize out the box, or off the bat, I should say, the problem is maintaining that over time, because then you've kind of created like this Frankenstein piece where you put bits here, and you're duct taping and gluing it together. So, from a delivery standpoint, we always, talk to our clients about, let's stay as out of the box as possible. Again, we know that there's going to need to be customizations. And so let's focus on just those, but going out the gate, let's not try to, again, create Frankenstein here. We want to keep things very simple, because as delivery teams and leads, we're expensive, let's be honest. We go away and the client needs to be able to maintain the platform once we're gone. So again, keeping it simple and out of the box, customizing where only they need to suit their business needs, allows them to optimize to scale, and for us to really give them a solution that is long-term that they can grow with.
So kind of using that, as our pivot point. So we know the platform we're dealing with, we know the unique nature of it. That's why we all work within it. And that's why it makes an awesome career, especially as women in technology, because it can grow. It is a sustainable career. And let's face it, it's a company that supports diversity and continues to strive for that equal pay gap. I mean, Salesforce is an amazing ship to be a part of, so to speak, as a delivery leader. The thing that Krissy and I identified as 3 unique areas for supporting these delivery teams, especially now in the time of COVID, is this notion that client relationships and our ability to connect with our clients have changed. That's one. The second piece is our statements of work are no longer our conversations, they are a task list. And it's more important than ever to be really clear and concise on those. And then lastly, how we handle change, our change control processes, our change orders need to be handled in maybe a different way, because now maybe they're not guardrails, maybe they're flexibility models that support our clients but protect our delivery teams. And so those are the 3 areas that we're going to kind of walk through today, because we feel like these are the low-hanging fruit and a way for us to kind of get back to basics, maybe some of the things that we've forgotten because we're in Zoom meetings all day. In fact, Krissy, we're amongst friends here. When I call them, like, I don't even have lipstick on. I don't even know what time it is.
No, this is not the get up. This is not how I planned on being part of this meeting. And I'm living and breathing this at this moment. I've hopped off of an internal call for a project where I'm serving as delivery lead to hop onto this. So again, what you're seeing, this, you want to get real, Renee, it doesn't get any more real than this.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I kind of like having this honest discussion, because so if we as delivery leaders are going through this, then what must our delivery teams on the ground be going through? And so this notion of starting with that client relationship as a key piece to take a step back and go, man, what was happening before COVID, and now there's handshakes. And so, Krissy, I know you've got some, your delivery stories span from Australia to London with the beautiful champagne company, but tell us a little bit about what building client relationships was like before COVID, and then some of these key things, creative things that we can do kind of in our COVID world today.
But before COVID, we're as consultants and, we're on site with the client. So we're usually, we've got a project and it's a Salesforce implementation. You're on site with the client for, 1 to 2 weeks, actually sometimes longer. And so you're meeting with them for 8 hours a day. You're in a conference room, you've got breakfast and lunch that's been scheduled. You've got your coffee breaks, then there's always dinner afterwards, at least 1 or 2 dinners with the clients. There's dinners with your team that become working dinners in order to, modify presentations, get things updated. But during these workshops, with our clients, we're having coffee breaks, we're taking breaks and we're walking together and having conversations and getting to know them, what their drivers are. Areas in the meeting where maybe, things weren't completely clear, where the client says yes, and you see the body language where it really was not clear, but that you need to move on. You're able to hash out some of those things. That was before COVID. Now we don't have that ability. So we're not meeting with our clients, expecting someone to stay online at their computer for 8 hours straight in order to get the, requirements, for their project. that's not realistic. So, we've definitely, this has put us in a bit of, it's really changed, I think, for us on the delivery side, but as well as our relationships and how we work with our clients and getting to know them and them getting to know us. Because again, that piece where we were meeting with our clients in person, that humanizes them. It humanizes us. Initially you come in and there's that nervousness and they see you, and especially me as a woman, right? I come into a room, I am not only a woman, but I'm a Black woman coming into these meetings. And so they see me, and I've been accused, they've asked if I was the analyst on the project or the project manager. I even had a client ask me, what is it that you do? And I told him, give me 1 second. And I walked in the middle of the room and let him know that I was running this project that he's paying a lot of money for. So again, that was before COVID. And so now again, to your point, Renee, the task, it is, we've got a statement of work, and now it's, being able to check the boxes off, and we're missing the coffee breaks. We're missing the time with our clients, getting to know them getting to know us, and really humanizing ourselves and building that trust. I find that those conversations, even if it is just shooting the breeze over the water cooler, that's where we got to know each other. And that's where that trust starts to build. And it's an amazing thing. Oprah has the aha moment where the light bulb goes off. Those are those breakthrough moments for me when we're on site, where it's like, okay, we've kind of broken down the wall a little bit, right? So now you see me in a different light, or maybe if you don't, I at least see you in a different light. And I'm able to use that, as a facilitator in the workshops to help pull out from you what we need to gather the requirements in order to, create the solution they need.
Yeah, and on the ground, we've heard some of these things like, what have you done to get to know your clients in lieu of that? Because now we need to bring a little bit more empathy to the table, and like you said, kind of get to know them. And internally, the funny thing is, I keep hearing this all the time, which is turn your camera on. I mean, good, bad, or indifferent. Krissy just said, look at me. This is who I am. Sometimes it's like it's needing to connect with someone in a way that lets them into your home, which is what we've done to date, right, with most of our clients. The best thing I heard was not to forget the little wins. We on a project here with my teams have had a huge integration push, and it happened in a matter of days, and it was a huge win. And normally when we were on site, we would have probably celebrated that. We'd have probably gone to lunch. We'd have gone over to the developers and high-fived them. And now we're so task-based. And so someone reminded me, they were like, celebrate those little and big wins, and find out who those people are, and just have that extra added touch point with them. And so these were just some of those things that came out that were like, oh yeah, that's a great way. I'm sure there is many more, and creatively, the way that we've gotten to know our clients and our business. Krissy alluded to it as far as our statements of work, and normally we would have built relationships, whether it be through the sales cycle, and sometimes get our delivery teams involved in initially those conversations. But that statement of work has changed a bit in the way that we document our contracts now. Not only do they need to be flexible for an ever-changing business, but the client is more educated on the tools that they want. They are doing more research. It's not, our sales cycles sometimes are longer because they are equipped with so much information. They almost get into this analysis paralysis view. And so I wanted to call out, and Krissy and I were talking about, I said, when delivery goes well, what's a key thing? And she went, when sales and delivery talk before the project kicks off. And I went, oh, that's a novel idea. Now it's kind of the proverbial, church and state situation where it's like, here's what we sold, now figure out how to deliver it. Krissy and I have been on both sides of those fence. It's how we made friends by we did that handshake across the aisle. And so there's a great trailhead that Salesforce offers. And I only call this out, it may seem very basic, but I call this out to you guys because when I started looking at getting back to basics on, being clear about what we were delivering, as opposed to just an email or shoot of the hip or taking it from a sales team, I went through this checklist, and I found gaps in my own statements of work that I thought, ooh, if I'd have had this, it would have been it would have clearly stated it. And it's one of those things that, like I said, it feels so basic and maybe something that we kind of gloss right over. But when Krissy brought it to my attention, she goes, when my statements of work are tight and I know exactly what I'm delivering, then I know where I can pivot, from a change perspective. So these were just calling out some of these things. I thought there was something else. Oh, talking about getting back, using the scope as your agenda item. So this trickles down to your delivery teams, making sure that they kind of surface it up when they've got meetings with the clients to say, hey, just a reminder, this is what we're, keeping everybody eye on the prize. This is what we're driving to reemphasize that. Anything around the statement of work, Krissy, you want to add to this?
Yeah, I do, because that statement of work is so important from a delivery perspective. You talk about the guardrails, Renee. Those are my guardrails. That lets me know and the team what we can do, and then what we can't do. And in this time, task takers of becoming task takers, it's even more important trying to juggle and understand where you can give a little bit as a delivery lead related to the scope, or where you have to draw a line in the sand. One of the things I was taught early on by a wonderful mentor and woman in the consulting world, and she told me, Krissy, it's either when there are changes that happen on a project, they happen because either one, the statement of work it's not clearly defined. Two, there's scope creep. And so again, you've got to manage that expectation with the client. Or three, you've got a combination of both. You've got scope creep and then the scope creep comes because you have a statement of work where it's a bit ambiguous. And so when that happens, it's going to cost you one of three things or a combination. It's either going to cost you time, budget, or scope. And that is so true, Renee. So again, the importance of the sales and delivery teams getting together, during the sales process. And again, you and I did this together, right? It made the project, even for those projects that are difficult, complex, it helps things to be a lot smoother when you've got your roadmap planned and you know where you're going. So that way, when things do start to veer off, okay, this is what I need to do to pull it back on.
Yeah. We started this conversation talking about our delivery teams being our North Star. That's who we're really gearing this towards. So how we can support them. You may hear us talk about things that seem outside of our delivery teams, but these were the things that protect our people in the trenches. And so when Krissy says, getting people involved early or, having those guardrails, it kind of brings us right to our next piece, which is our change orders and how we manage change. And I think this is really where, if you want to offer protection for your teams in this world where things are ambiguous, they can't get to know their clients, they kind of have an idea of what's outlined in a statement of work, but they really are just given a date and time to show up for the internal kickoff where they're like, okay, what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, and you know what, but Renee, it's also guardrails for the client as well. That statement of work, right? Because sometimes we need to protect the clients from themselves. We'll have these workshops and we'll do, these sessions where, it's like art of the possible. What is the ultimate goal, right? And then we have to bring them back to the North Star. And that's where that statement of work, it's like, all right, guys, let's get back on track. So again, I know I emphasized and gave an example from the delivery side, but also I want to make sure that the clients, because it's a way to protect them as well. So, it's a two-way street there.
Yeah. And, before we in delivery kind of think about these change orders as a way to kind of protect us. So when we hear scope creep or when an issue or when a risk, Krissy, we were talking about this the other night, when a risk comes up, it's going to become an issue. Green to red doesn't happen. I mean, it can happen overnight. The change order, when we thought about change orders before, we thought about them protecting us. And in the conversations that we had with some of our colleagues, said, change orders now have become flexible tools that we get the client engaged right at the statement of work to say, hey, we want to have a model in place that allows you and allows us to, within reason, have a contract in place that will allow us to flex. We were working on a huge project, a vaccine management project, and the governor instituted new regulations overnight, and we had to shift and change in a moment's notice to configure something to allow that to happen.
So when that happened, was there like a communications plan, right, for the team as well as the client that you could use? And that way, again, it kind of keeps the chaos, even though it's a chaotic situation, right? It gives you a bit of guardrails. Did you have that?
Fortunately we did, but it happened so fast. I'm going to be honest with you and tell you, I don't know that we looked at it. I think we just really were just in the moment trying to respond, but we did have it in place to go back to as a guide, to say, okay, this is what will happen next. But it wasn't one of the, we could say, hey, let us take a look at it. We're going to t-shirt size this. We'll get back with you. We'll see when we can deliver. It was like, no, it's got to be turned on tomorrow. So you said something earlier. You said those three things that it impacts. It impacts
time, budget, or scope, one of the three.
And so it couldn't impact time. Budget is what it is. And scope, it was going to definitely go out of what we were in. But the thing that you just hit on was that constant communication, constant and consistent communication. And timely communication with the client to understand, okay, what's the need and how quick can we pivot? That our team did feel empowered, and that in my past has been something that has not been in place, where the team was not empowered in a time of escalation to make a decision or know who to go to. And so then it really became kind of a standstill, and the client was frustrated because we couldn't change. And our contracts are not meant to be so ironclad that we can't change. It's within
right. It's within, and change orders aren't always bad either, because sometimes you can have a $0 change order where it's, a like for like, or maybe it's just a little extra. Again, it goes back to the beginning of our conversation, Renee, building that relationship with our clients and getting to know them and understanding their drivers, trying to get that out of a client when you're sitting on a Zoom call or a Teams meeting, running a workshop. It's hard, it's the task. We've got to get through this on the agenda. We've got to get through that. And so that kind of gets lost. And so again, the pieces where I mentioned where something's going to cost you time, budget, or scope with that change, sometimes it is as a delivery lead. We make the decision, this extra, it's a couple of extra emails. Yes, it's a few extra hours, but it's value added to the relationship with the client, right? I'm not going to go and change order you to death. And again, it's at the discretion. You've got to have a bit of a balance there, right? And sometimes, you look at the schedule and like, okay, well, we finished this up a little bit early, so we do have a few extra hours though that we can use for that. But again, you just want to make sure that it's documented. So, and in your situation, again, with the vaccine management rollout and things being immediate, sometimes with the change orders, you don't have time for that, but you did have the communications plan, which is key as being a delivery lead, making sure that you have that in place so that when these situations arise, again, you've got your guardrails.
Yeah, our teams really knocked it out of the park and took that as an opportunity to tighten those communications with our project sponsors. I put on here, you and I were joking about change, like being able to predict change, which is just hysterical given this past year. And I was like, okay, get out your crystal ball or the magic 8 ball and shake it up. I mean, who knows when things are going to take a hard left. But I think if it's anything that you're hearing from Krissy and I, is that in this virtual world that we've now become accustomed to, because Krissy and I were quite road warriors, and our teams will tell you we would roll up our sleeves and be in our workshop meetings. It's been very difficult to turn that off. And that's something to not, to acknowledge here that, we've all kind of taken an emotional, I won't say beating, but we've kind of taken an emotional blow a little bit from the juice that we get from being on site with our clients and really having empathy for what they're dealing with, managing some of our large clients and understanding this is not their only project, that they were running 8 other projects. Really gave my team the empathy to lean in and go, Renee, if we help her with this will help with that. And now it's sometimes hard to do that. So we wanted to call out that building those relationships and being creative to really lean in and get to know your clients, whether it be virtual coffees or high fives, or even seeing if they're okay with sharing their mailing address and dropping something in the mail to them, all the way to your contracts for your terms and conditions, and understanding from a sales perspective to a delivery perspective, really clearly and succinctly what you're going to deliver, and go back to basics and ask, what business challenge are we trying to solve, and how are we going to do that? And Salesforce, being the awesome platform that it is, there is 1,001 ways to do it. Just give yourself some leeway there to keep it pretty structured. And then lastly, this notion of these risk controls and change control orders in place. I mean, this would really give you those guardrails to, ensure quality delivery and to ensure that your team has the opportunity to survive in kind of this new changing world.
I think a good term for it would be organized chaos, right? Because we know that things are going to happen, right? On the projects, Renee, you've dealt it, you lived it, I've lived it. With these Salesforce projects, there's always going to be something, but it's being able to, have control the chaos. So keeping it organized chaos, if maybe that's even, canceling each other out, but it's being able to control that, keep the team focused, keeping the client focused, and ensuring that, again, you've got that communication, you've got the transparency with them, and they feel like they have a partner. I think that's the other key, Renee. It's making them feel like they have the partner. So that's, dropping them the note, the virtual high five, giving them, dropping a note in the mail, or even, something just to thank them and let them know that you appreciate them and their time.
Yeah. And kind of to close, to wrap this up, we'd love to open it up to questions, but I'd also like to open it up to what creative ways have you found to connect with your clients or to help out delivery teams that kind of feel like they're on an island because they're not near headquarters? They really are maybe on an island. I'd love to open it up.
I will say it's so important. You're so on point about the handoff from sales to the implementation team and delivery. I've worked on both sides, and it's so important. And it's actually, I think it's really key to develop the relationship with those teams, to get to know them, because I've been in a position before where in my former life and when I was working at IBM, some people, I was on the pre-sale side. And so, when professional services came in, they're just like, well, I don't know who's doing that. I'm not sure, and I actually, made an effort to get to know them, and I had a great relationship with them. And when I was working on site, it was, cause it's a fine line between pre-sales and post-sales and handing that over. So, and if you're on an account team, like I was, it really doesn't end. You're still the account team with that client. So you want to stay involved, and stay on top of things, of what's going on.
You actually bring up a good point too, because, when delivery is able to come in with sales during the sales cycle, they're able to establish that relationship. But to your last point that you just mentioned, the team goes away, right? And you're still left with the account. What I have found in my experience is that from a delivery side, by building that relationship, and even though you're owning that account, that's also a great way in how we've been able to retain clients and grow the accounts, because that trust is there, and there's that handoff, and there's that synergy between delivery and sales. So, there are many benefits to that, not just on the upfront, but also throughout the project and post-project as well.
Hi, I have a quick question. I'm just getting into Salesforce as an admin. I already have my certification, just dabbling obviously with Trailhead. But I wanted to know what recommendations or advice you have for somebody who completely changed careers. Because originally I was a teacher, then I was in publishing, and now I'm going into another career and trying to utilize Salesforce more. But I've noticed that a lot of positions require, 3 years experience, 4 years experience. What can you suggest for those situations?
So I think definitely the trailheads and getting that experience there, that's one. Also certifications. So you getting that certification, that stands out, because even though you may not have the experience just yet, and you're looking to build that with this new career path that you created, you're letting them know, like, hey, I've done the upfront work. Like, it's kind of like coach put me in the game. And so I think that's one. And then two, it's the leveraging your network. So taking a look at the folks that that have the Salesforce experience, because again, recommendations or references at a company are definitely a lot, valued and looked at, because then there's a direct connection with that individual. So I think there's a few pieces to that. So again, just to recap, the first piece is the trailheads and the certifications. And then the second piece is, leveraging your network with the people that in Salesforce. And this is a great platform to, maybe even expand that network.
Yeah, no, I would echo that, Michelle. I think that I was just on the phone yesterday with someone in our organization who her husband's in the Navy and she was a teacher, and then they moved to San Diego, and then she did designing custom closets, and she was like, "Are you following this path? Is it crazy?" And I was like, "No, I mean it sounds pretty normal." And she goes, and then all of a sudden I started doing some trailheads, and I was like, "Oh, this," and I did creative work for a nonprofit. A nonprofit was looking for some volunteer hours, like, do you want to volunteer? And so she was doing the trailheads and then did some volunteer work for this nonprofit, and then fell into Salesforce has a Salesforce vet program where they hire spouses, veterans and or their spouses, and put them on projects, and they've got vouchers. Salesforce is such a great platform for someone to provide vouchers for certification. So don't feel like you got to come out of pocket. As Krissy said, this call within itself, you should probably just write down people's names and then go stalk them on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, I saw you in this. Do you have a minute to chat?" Because I think the platform itself, I mean, I've definitely been a part of, big master data management platforms and product information with retail and CPG. But I got to tell you, there's something pretty impressive about the Salesforce platform and the opportunity that allows you to touch every part of business. This notion of 360 customer or 360 patient, it's really such an open-ended platform. I think you'll have fun with it because it's endless. You can do a lot of things with it. So don't be discouraged, A. And I think the education piece, I mean, Salesforce is providing a lot of platforms to help teachers and provide school systems to manage their catalogs differently and organize things. So you may even, kind of go back to that education as far as a point of interest.
So next one comes from Anu. What tips would you give on how to negotiate with the client when they are moving away from best practice?
That is always a tricky one. So when clients are moving away from best practices and they are just dead set, they've got their minds that this is what they want and how it's going to work, always give them options. So what you need to do is map out the pros and cons of what you're suggesting, what they're suggesting, and then have them look at the long-term effects. It's the trickle effect of what they're suggesting that's going against best practices. And again, you have to make it clear to them that, this is going against the best practice, and, you state why, but the pros and cons, as well as, the downstream impacts, that always kind of gets the light bulb thinking, because sometimes, again, clients aren't thinking that far ahead. They're just thinking immediate need, like right now. But for us, on the delivery side, our architects and solutioning, we're always thinking not just right now, but, forward. We're thinking of future proofing. So I find that when you talk this out, instead of just telling the client, no, we're not doing that, it's, against best practices, they never respond or react well to that. You lay out the options, you show them the impacts visually. Put it in a PowerPoint slide. Keep it very simple. Brass tacks, right? When you take that back to them and you lay it out, and then you also lay out what your recommendation is in that best practice, one, you've got it documented. Two, it gives them a chance to voice what they really want. And who knows, maybe it's an additional requirement that can go in the backlog. Maybe there's some slight tweaks to the existing solution you can make, right? In order to give them part of what they're wanting, maybe set the foundation for the ask, or maybe it's just completely against the grain. And look, this is how we need to chart forward in order for you to be successful. You ultimately put the ownership back on them, let them make the decision. And again, if they still are deciding to move forward with, going against the best practice, again, you let them know that this is not the best practice. You want to make sure that they understand that there are impacts, and this is, against the recommendation. You document that, you make sure your delivery lead knows, and, and then you move forward.
I think that's well said. I took most of my, my diplomacy from Krissy, because see, I would want to tell them that's not the way you do it. And you've hired us. And Krissy would got to list it out and do the pros and the cons. It's like, is the carrot today, the reward today, worth the stick of pain tomorrow? You got to make them see that. And it's really tough, right?
People don't want to see the long-term picture. It's always short-term thinking.
Exactly.
And that's why we have to pull them anew. We have to pull them back in, right? We have to remind them that's getting them back again, the guardrails, right? The scope, we got to pull you on back. We got to put you, You've gone off the exit. We need to get you back on the highway.
It's difficult to voice your concerns. Sometimes your voice is drowned out.
You know what? But here's the thing, and being a woman, and oh my goodness,
yeah,
now you've hit a hot
minority.
spot.
I guess maybe that comes into play too. I don't know.
But you know what? But it is. I was just telling Renee that there was a project, and I was telling the client, giving them a recommendation on what they can do, and the client then goes to the business analyst and says, is that right? And it's just, and it's. I'm like, really? You realize that that's a business analyst that is still like learning the platform, right? And this is happening. Yeah.
But not trust
and
you're a woman and black.
Well, and I don't call myself an expert either. And I think Renee, this is a conversation I knew we had. Like, again, I called myself a Salesforce student because we're still learning. These are just our experiences. And again, from being a chef and the scars that we have from being in the kitchen, and trust me, Renee and I got plenty of those. This is just based on our experiences. But one thing I will tell you as a woman, even if you are by yourself, you make sure your voice is heard. You speak up on the call, like when your gut is telling you something's not right, or you've heard something stated that's incorrect, you need to voice that. And it may be going against the grain. There's a way to do it where you're not, it could be someone on your team that stated something incorrectly, right? But, there's a way that you can do that without it being threatening, but also making sure your voice is heard and your concerns. But Anu, never let anyone try to silence you or to minimize your voice. Use it.
I know, I have to learn that. And diplomacy.
It is, it's scary. It's a bit of a balance, because then we're seen as women. I've been called abrasive. I've been told that I'm too direct. I've been told I'm offensive. And so, that diplomacy, it's a bit of a balance. And Renee will tell you, I can be a bull in a china shop sometimes. But again, there are times, internally where I put my foot down and I'm like, no.
My favorite is Brene Brown's, her Dare to Lead book, and clear is kind. And that really resonated with me because, I try to be sometimes a little bit like, I'll go around, but, clear is kind. I'm being very clear about the impacts that this is going to make. That's very clear. And that's a book I would pick up, or a podcast that I would pick up, because she just kind of delivers it in a way that kind of made me feel good and okay about being a strong voice. I felt like, no, clear is kind.
The other thing is that you just reminded me of as women, coming into this tech world, it's interesting because I call it finding your voice. And it's coming from that place where you speak of confidence and where you're not willing to back down and not, it takes some time to develop that anew. And you just reminded me of that. But, it sounds like you're in the process of finding your voice. And, in finding your voice, it's the tone, it's your delivery of how, when things aren't right, or when, something is telling you, hey, maybe we need to dig a little further. It takes some practice, but again, I think you're on that track and that path of finding your voice. And once you find it, I promise you, it becomes very powerful as a woman in tech to know that you're coming from a place of confidence. And even if no one else agrees with you, you know that you're on the right path because it's the right decision for your client or for the client and the team.
Yeah, and try to convince them that I'm thinking of your benefit, not mine, right?
You always take it, you always bring it back to them and their benefits and what their key achievements are, what they're looking to do. When you bring it back to them and let them know you've got their interest at heart, again, that's kind of that connection and building the trust we talked about a bit earlier. That can actually open up floodgates. And I know that there's several people on the call with projects I've been on where things were a bit difficult and it was hard to break down that wall and get to know the client and become humanized. Again, this was pre-COVID, but then once we did, there were just a couple of side conversations. Let me tell you, it really changed the relationship with the client and the trust that was built. And then they were then coming to me and coming to the other, women that are on this call as well, and looking for us to validate or asking for our opinions versus, us trying to convince them.
And also, when you're from a different country, the culture is also different, right?
Yeah. It is. It's being, you touched on, and I think I'd be a bit remiss if I didn't say anything, but being a minority woman, especially, I've been, being a Black woman and coming into these meetings, again, I'm usually surrounded, initially when I first started by men. I'm seeing it changed over the years, and I am very, very blessed and fortunate to be at a company where, you know, that's they're not looking at me as Krissy Jones, the female, but they're just looking at me as Krissy Jones. And that's been the case at other places I've been, some places not so much, but, you know, it's very interesting, and the looks and the thoughts and the things that are said to us as women, and especially minority women, versus, you know, maybe someone that's not a minority that's a woman, and how we're perceived.
I wish someone, you know, people would be blind to your gender and skin color and nationality, right? But that doesn't mean happen. And that's not just others. Sometimes we do it too. We have to recognize our biases too.
Yeah, we do. It's the biases. You're right. It's the biases.
So the next question is, well, this kind of goes back, but when they won't hear what you are saying about best practices, even the downstream impact, because they are 100% sure it is correct, do you walk away? And then they also say it's an ethical issue for them. And this is from Lisa.
So Lisa, what I will tell you, that's where you document it, right? Again, it goes back to the documentation. You've listed out the pros and cons, the downstream effects. You've got your recommendation in there. You mark that as a decision. You know, again, part of delivery, you've got your RAID log, right? With the risk, you know, that's one of the decisions that they've made. So you note it as a risk, a potential issue, but also a decision. So again, you've got a way to go back if something breaks, you know, things start to go south. This is your way of protecting yourself as well as protecting the client and reminding them, hey, this was the decision that you made. We made it very clear to you that this was against our recommendation and best practices. You asked us to, you know, move forward, and now this is the downstream effect. So again, it's document, 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 document.
And on the flip side of that, from if it's a new engagement or even an existing engagement with an existing client, you know, we're not a fan of sometimes walking away from work. And I think that's what you were alluding to. When do we say, hey, this is probably not a good fit for us? So in Krissy's, you know, there is a couple of sides to every coin, so to speak. And I have been in a situation where I've had a delivery team come to me and say, I don't know that this is I don't know if this is going to set us up for success. And of course I was like, we're going to walk away from what? I mean, come on, I think that's a great project. And, you know, here's the pipeline. And the layout was, I just don't know if we're going to be successful. They really want to use the platform as a repository, and that's it. And they're not really concerned about the bad data coming in, and they're not really concerned about over customizing it. They're trying to make Salesforce something it's not. And that was a hard conversation, but that's where you get that executive sponsor from your side or the client advisor. You get those involved, and you give them your true assessment of, here's the worth win. You know, we used to do SWOT analysis, you know, your strengths, your weaknesses, the opportunities, the threats. There's also this opportunity of a worth win. It's a quadrant, and you go, is it worth it to the client? Is it worth it to our company? Is it worth it to the delivery team? And you kind of go through that exercise. So if you're ever challenged in a way where you're really struggling, use that exercise and see if it's worth it, and then have those conversations and let your executive team be the one to have the conversation with the clients.
Yeah.
And most times clients are more, they like that you've said, I don't know that this is a good fit for us. And you're not walking away from business, you're actually creating a partnership because you're kind of putting some limits in there.
And Laura Nash, you are absolutely correct. I think I saw a note pop up from you about remember who's footing the bill. It is, the client is ultimately paying, and you want to give them the best solution possible. But yeah, sometimes you've got to know when to cut the losses. And like Renee said, you activate that communications plan that we mentioned earlier. You let the leadership and the executives handle that. And then you as a team, you know, again, your delivery lead should be charting y'all towards, okay, if this is what the client wants, solutioning out, you build it out, and you keep things progressing.
When coming into a new client and you find the Frankenstein org, or they want the highly customized org, how do you voice the fact that being more simple will ultimately be better for them in the long run? And this is from Adam. In workshops, exercises. So when that happens and the client, you know, wants the Frankenstein, the customized solution, this is where, you know, your workshops are great because, you know, you've got sales, you have IT, you've got the marketing team, maybe a products team, you have all of them together.
there are different exercises that you can do, or what you do is you break everyone out of their little pods. So you break up, you take someone from marketing, someone from the sales team, someone from IT, and you give them actually working exercises. What that's doing is, one, it's, taking some of the pressure off you from talking and just asking a lot of these open-ended questions and documenting. It's actually making it interactive, one. Two, what you're doing is you're allowing them to now, these groups typically work in silos, not together, Adam. And so you're allowing them to actually talk together and understand the impacts, not just from their side, but the trickle effects. And so when you do that, it actually kind of, I've seen it with clients, the light bulb goes off and it's like, oh, well, this actually doesn't make sense, or we're creating more work for themselves. So again, it takes a bit of finessing, and again, it's a bit different with COVID times, but there's wonderful tools out there. Teams has the breakout rooms. You've got with Zoom, you have murals. So using those in order to, again, create some exercises for the client, where you've got different people from different groups on the client within the client's business to get together and complete this exercise to develop a solution. Again, a lot of light bulbs go off.
What do you suggest to aid in doing your job better when you are parachuted into a project after it has started?
Oh, Krissy, this is so primed for you. I'm just going to tee it up for you that Krissy is the lead of the recovery team in most situations. And that's what I would call it. I'd be like, send in the recovery SEALs. So Krissy, give your experience when you get parachuted in.
When you get parachuted in, you've got a lot of information that you have to synthesize very quickly. So you've got to be able to get the noise, because there's going to be emotions involved from the client side and from your team. And so the best way to do that is I immediately just immerse myself in the meetings. I don't say anything. I listen, and I'm hearing, and I'm listening from an objective space where I'm hearing what the client is saying and separating their emotion and trying to pull out their needs, and then what we're saying. And what I'll do is, when I do hear something where they're misaligned and I've parachuted in to help recovery, I'm like, hey, wait a minute, guys, we're not speaking the same language here. This is what you're saying as the client, correct me if I'm wrong, and I get their confirmation, and then I, from the team, get their confirmation, and then you start to bridge the gap in the middle. Again, it's not easy. It's usually some quick reading, again, to synthesize what's happened. Usually connecting with the project manager as well is really good, and the delivery lead, the executive team, to understand what happened, where they're at. So that way, again, when you're going into these meetings, and even though you're listening and you're silent, you understand like the gravity of the situation and how yellow or red the project is, in order for you to help course correct it.
Yeah, it wasn't so much course correct. It was that I was hired. My hiring took longer. And so everything had started, and so I've been playing catch up for about a month, and just trying to, number one, immerse myself in with the project, and at first learn because when they hire, this is job description. Well, there's more to it, but and then of course my coworkers, and then the client too, and then doing it on Zoom, which I've worked remotely for years, but still.
Yeah.
So you're a little bit of a different situation, and it's not parachuting in to save the project. Then you're being parachuted in to the project, and it's an interesting dynamic, because the team is already formed, right? And you feel like you're this outsider, where it's like, hey guys, it's kind of, this is like being back in school, right? It's like you're starting a new school in the middle of the year. And so I will say that, in those instances, again, this is using your voice. You're listening, going through that documentation, but you were hired for a reason. So when you hear something that doesn't sound right, or maybe it just needs clarification, maybe it is right, but you're just having a hard time understanding, ask questions.
Yeah.
Because that is the only way that you're going to be able to get yourself established and get your footing, and establish your role on that project and what you need to do to be able to execute. You may be the new guy, but don't let that intimidate you with the client or with the team that's formed. Know that you're there for a reason, and just like, look, hey guys, like, I'm still learning. I may ask you 101 questions, but this is, you're helping to get me up to speed. And there's usually that one person on the project that you'll be able to connect with. And so maybe there's some side conversations for like a knowledge transfer, right? So again, it's back to the virtual coffee. So instead of with the client, this is with your team. So, hey, do you mind if I set up, like 15 minutes with you, or I have an idea, or I'm not quite understanding that. Pull that person in, have a one-on-one conversation. And that's another way to get yourself acclimated to the project, build rapport with the team, but also start to get things done that you need to get done.
This is from Martha. I'm new to Salesforce and I'm currently employed at a consulting team. I'd love any more guidance when you're starting a new project. How can I gain my clients' trust and avoid them thinking I'm not the expert?
This is where transparency comes in. If you're coming in and you're just learning, lean on your team. But when the client asks you a question, instead of just saying, I don't know, just let them know, you know what, let me get back to the team. And so we can brainstorm some ideas for you. It's all about, that being transparent that way. It lets them know that you're not trying to pull the wool over their eyes, or you're not trying to, sell them a bill of goods. It's not good. It's allowing you to learn, but also it's building that transparency with them and that communication. And so don't think that they're going to look at you as if you're dumb or you don't know what you're talking about, because honestly, if you try to BS your way through it, let's be honest, they're going to sniff that out pretty quickly and you're going to get nervous and then you're going to back yourself into a corner. So leverage your team and again, provide the transparency. Again, don't just say, I don't know. Say, you know what, let me talk to the team about this and let's see what ideas we come back to you with.
I think what's always helped me in starting out and what I remember was being really inquisitive about the client and their business. So of course, you're not going to know, you're not the expert, but what you can get really up to speed on really quick and probably be an expert better than your teams is to know the client, their business, what drivers, what challenges, and then just make that statement, say, I'm really lucky to be surrounded by such an amazing group of individuals who know this platform. So bring your questions because we have such a great team, but you leaning in, knowing more about their business and understanding why decisions are being made, that kind of will elevate you and start building the trust and the kind of this connection with the client outside of how many years you've been in Salesforce or not. I mean, there were several years in the beginning, I could not configure my way out of a paper bag, but I used Salesforce. And then of course, I meet people like Krissy and then I'm forced to learn how to configure things because, you got to keep up with the Joneses.
No pun intended.
That's what I would recommend is lean in and understand the client and their business.
What tool do you use to document the projects? So for example, the risks, the decisions, etc. Is that via Word, Excel, PM tools?
So it varies by client. So, I've used Excel, we've used Jira, I've used Microsoft Project. There's various tools. Again, being in consulting, we usually typically, the client has their own set of tools that they like us to use. So we cater to that. But yeah, it's typically one of the project management tools. So again, Jira or a Microsoft Project.
Yeah, I mean, like Krissy said, I've seen it a million ways. You know what I keep going back to, which we're talking about Salesforce, so it's kind of blasphemy, is Excel. I know there's like project tracker and stuff, but man, I can't get away from that Excel. I just, I've had teams that use that and it seems like it translates on all sides. But there's tons out there for sure. And Trailhead actually has, I think, or Salesforce Trailhead has one on project management, and they also give some links to some different apps and things within the App Exchange, which is also fun to play with.
Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. It was a pleasure to have you guys.